Hello and welcome. Today I'm here with a book review for These Fleeting Shadows by Kate Alice Marshall. This is a young adult horror novel about a young girl who inherits her ancestral family home. Helen left Harrow, their family home, with her mother when she was only 7 years old. She doesn't have much memory of her time there. She doesn't remember many of her family members, and they've pretty much gone no contact ever since. But when her grandfather dies, they go back for his funeral, and Helen learns that he left everything to her. He left her the house, the money, the grounds, everything. But his will stipulates that in order to inherit these things, she must stay on the grounds of Harrow for 1 full year. If she leaves the grounds at any point in the next year, not only will she forfeit the home and the money, but the whole family will be left destitute, as the will stipulates that she is the only person allowed to inherit anything. So she has the hopes of the whole family riding on her. But the longer she stays, the more she learns about Harrow itself and about her family history, and that there's a lot more going on than just inheriting a building. I give this a full 5 stars. I love this, and I really did not expect to be saying that about a young adult horror novel because I'm not a big horror reader, and that is an understatement. I pretty much never read horror, and especially supernaturally inclined horror. But everything about this was absolutely stunning. I have nothing negative to say. This is just going to be a glowingly positive, wonderful review. This was recommended to me by Carrie over at Spines and Spoilers. I will link their channel down below. Definitely go check them out because they're super lovely and one of my favorite people on here. But to get into this wonderful, amazing gem of a book, this has been my favorite read of 2023 so far. It was so gorgeous, so stunning. I have nothing negative to say. This is going to be ridiculously positive, so let's just get into this and have a very happy, glowing, wonderful review. From the beginning, I was down. The characters are very interesting and I really love their interactions. There's a lot of exposition in this book, especially towards the beginning, because as Helen is going back to her family home, she doesn't know any of her family members. She doesn't know her way around Harrow Hall. She doesn't know any of the history. Like, she just doesn't know anything. So it's kind of like you're learning along with the main character. And I will say, ordinarily, that's not really my thing. I do find that to be kind of dry most of the time, but in this book it flowed so well and it felt so real. One of her cousins kind of took her under his wing and was like explaining who everyone was, and he was like, well, that's Uncle so-and-so, that's my mother, that's my mother's husband, and just like explaining everything in a way that worked really well. It just like showcased his character. And the interactions felt so natural that I was like, I should be bothered by this, but I'm not. I like this. I would read a whole book of just them like chatting about nothing, kind of, because it was really well done and it was just charming in a way. And all the characters were like that, where everyone was so like distinctive and like everyone had their own personality and like their own likes and dislikes, and everyone had their own motivations for what they were doing that were just like so clearly defined by the end of the book. Like, you understood where everyone was coming from the beginning, and it was one of those books where now that I've reached the end and I know what happened and what it was all like building towards, I kind of want to go back and reread it knowing what happened and knowing everyone's motivations, because you really start off this book knowing nothing. Like, nothing is explained to you. Helen doesn't know anything, so you're just learning along with her, and basically everyone else has greater knowledge of the story than Helen. You're really in the dark for a lot of this, and it was really masterfully done. But I would so love to go back to this and just read it knowing what happens. It was just one of those books that's just like, it takes you on a journey. I also really loved the house itself. The house was so interesting. Essentially, Helen's ancestors, this family's ancestors, was like a really weird dude who was into like spirituality and witchcraft and demonology, or like, I don't know specifically, but like stuff like that. He was into some weird stuff. And he built this house to be like a labyrinth so that you couldn't find your way out, that you would just be like, it's not truly a maze, but it's like the more you walk it, the more you're just like, everything looks exactly the same on every floor. And it's like Helen finds herself throughout this book just walking the house for hours and getting kind of lost in it. And as a reader, you also get kind of lost in this house. And then outside of the house, the grounds kind of open up. And it's funny because the grounds are really the opposite of the house, where the house is this trap almost of like, you just get caught doing the same things over and over. You can't find your way out. You can't figure out where you're going. And then you get to the grounds and it's just wide open space. And the contrast of those two settings was so beautifully done because Helen can't leave. So this entire book essentially takes place on the grounds or in the house. And you are very much trapped there with her as these horrifying things just build around you. But my favorite part by far, like, what made this book amazing, because up in the first 2/3 of this book, I was gonna give it 4 stars for being really good. Maybe horror wasn't really my thing. The supernatural stuff was maybe like a little bit much for me because there was some weird imagery going on and some weird like supernatural occurrences in the house. It's not ghosts. A recurring line in this book is there are no ghosts at Harrow, which people say with frequency in a kind of disturbing way. You'd almost prefer if they said like, yeah, there are ghosts here. It's like, well, if there aren't ghosts here, what does that mean? Concerning. But my favorite thing was the ending. The final third of this book was absolutely stunning and mind-blowing. I adored it. Like, I was down for this book. I was enjoying it. And then things started happening towards the end, and I was like, wait. And then things kept happening, and you get to this very big plot twist, which I obviously cannot discuss here. This is a spoiler for your review. But you get to this plot twist, and the plot twist happens when there is still a significant portion of the book left. The point of the book is not the plot twist, but it spends so much time exploring this plot twist and what it means for these people and these characters and their emotions and like what everything means in the greater scheme of things. And it's just like absolutely breathtaking. Like, I'm trying so hard to capture my feelings on that without spoiling anything, because I do feel like that's one of those things that you want to be surprised for going in. Like, you don't want to immediately know what's going to happen. You want to watch it unfold. But it was wonderful. Like, I did like the plot twist itself, but it wasn't just about the plot twist. It was the time and the exploration that she put into it after the revelation of like what was happening. You realize what was happening, but then there's so much more of the book to go, and it was just like I couldn't put this down, and I just kept reading and devouring, and it was like midnight and I had to get up for work the next morning, and I was just still reading, and then it made me cry. And like, I was not expecting a young adult horror novel to be my favorite book of the year and make me cry. Like, it absolutely blew me away. Like, I just adored it. There's a small romantic subplot in here that is just beautifully done, that just like tugs at your heartstrings. And like, these are 17-year-olds who like know nothing and do nothing and like have no experience, but like it's utterly heartwarming and built up so well in such like a realistic way in this absolutely horrifying setting. And I loved that. I love the relationship with her and her mother. Like, absolutely, like, wrecked my soul. Her relationship with her mother is really wonderful. They have such a supportive and close-knit relationship because they were kind of almost exiled from Harrow together. A lot of the book explores like their feelings towards each other and her stepfather and what he means for their family and kind of the hold that Harrow has on all 3 of them and like what it means for their family. And just, it wrecked my soul. It made me cry, but at the same time it made me so happy. Like, for all that this was a horror novel with absolutely some grotesque scenes and some deep trauma of all of the characters that was explored and just tragedy, to be perfectly blunt about it, it had such a happy, almost optimistic tone of just like, this is heartwarming. Like, this book makes me feel good. Like, the ending of this book makes me experience positive emotions, and it feels uplifting in a way that I really was not expecting of a horror novel, but I really, really loved, because she used the grotesque horror in order to build to that very earned happiness. Like, I wouldn't say this is a happy ending, like there is no happily ever after in a horror novel, but she builds it in a way that you feel that kind of like warmth of happiness, of like hopefulness at the end, and I adored that. Like, if anyone else has any recommendations for horror novels that have that like ending of hopefulness, I would love recommendations, because I wasn't expecting to appreciate that element of this book so much, but it was absolutely earned. And I love a book that earns its own happiness. And Kate Alice Marshall really works towards that. And her writing is amazing. And her author's note at the ending of this, explaining where she got the idea for this story and what it meant to her, only made me love it more. I apologize if this whole review has been super vague, but it's so hard for me to talk about everything I loved about this book without just giving away everything that this book is. If you like horror, if you like supernatural horror, if you're trying to like branch out into horror a little bit and you don't know where to start, highly recommend this book. I loved it. It made me cry. It made me happy. It was absolutely wonderful. So please, if you pick up anything this year, I would highly recommend you give this a go. Let me know down below if you've read These Fleeting Shadows and what you thought of it if you have. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.